Welcome to today's speaker review. We are looking at the Mojo 2 from Ophidian. It is a rocking speaker. Yes, it does other genres as well, but for me, it's all about rock and roll. So if you like a bit of prog from the 70s, maybe rock it out with some AC/DC, or like the kind of really gravelly, nasty indie rock from the 90s, like I do, you're in the right place. So, let's get ready to rock. Yeah. What? Hello and welcome back to Small Room Audio. Today we are reviewing this, the Ophidian Mojo 2 speaker with its Aeroflex technology. So, okay, before we go into it, I have to tell you off the bat now, if you like jazz, choral music or vocal singers, you should probably turn away now because this is not for you. However, if you are a rock and roller or you like a bit of indie rock from the 90s or the 80s or any time someone gets a guitar out and those recordings might not be the best recordings in the world, but you love them, this speaker right here is going to be for you. This is a rocker speaker. We love it loud, and we'll get into a bit more about that a little bit later on. But first of all, let's have a quick tour of the Ophidian Mojo 2. It comes in at £1,200. The cabinet itself is very nice, and in fact, in general, the fit and finish of this is super. It really is rather lovely. It's got great sort of finish on the back, and the Aeroflex technology piece down the bottom, which we'll talk about in a moment, is really nicely implemented with a nice metal plate on the back with your standard binding posts, single rather than bi-wired, because I don't know that many people like bi-wiring these days anyway. On the front we have two 11cm mid-bass woofers and also a CS driver from Norway, all very high quality, and inside of it we have Mundorf air core parts, and I think it just gives you an idea as to the quality and the sort of engineering thought that has gone into this speaker, which is of very high quality indeed. So, that aside, for your 1,200 quid, you get in a box, which definitely passes the tap test, which has good parts inside, looks very nice, is quite small, it's only 4.4 kilograms in weight, which is pretty good, and has this kind of very unusual layout. So you've got MTM sort of design with the tweeter in the middle, offset slightly to the side, which means that you can, if you want to, place it on the outside or the inside, depending on what sounds better to you. I prefer it on the outside for a wider sound stage, but it gives you options, which is quite good. Now, before we go into the mainstay of all the things I love about it, let me just pop it down here. Let's talk about what I don't love, which is kind of unusual for a review, because normally you do all of the caveats at the end, but today we're doing the caveats at the beginning, because when I start waxing lyrical about this, we're going to go into quite a lot of music as well, which I think is going to be quite a lot of fun, because this speaker's kind of brought me back to my teenage years, and I've been going through all my CDs that I used to love when I was rocking out as a 17, 16-year-old back in the day, which was unfortunately quite a long time ago. Anyway, what do I not like about it? Well, okay, first of all, frequency response goes down to 52 Hertz, so you're getting fantastic mid-bass, but you're not getting very much sub-bass. Now, that may or may not be that important to you, but certainly this is a mid-bass style thumping speaker. It's an 86 dB sensitivity at 4 ohms. You do need a bit of power to shift it. In terms of amplifiers, I actually tried 3 different amplifiers with it. The Line Magnetic 508IA, which is a tube amplifier at 48 watts, which normally is my go-to, really love it sort of amplifier. But for this particular speaker, it wasn't enough. There wasn't really enough driving those 2 mid-bass drivers. I also used it with a Class AB amplifier, the Griffin Attila, which does 200 watts at 4 ohms. Now, you'd think that would be a great match, but actually, the Attila pumps out a lot of bass presence, and in my very tiny room, it was almost too much. And weirdly, the cheapest amplifier of the 3 I've got in at the moment, which is the Exposure XM5 integrated, was the best in terms of matching with this. And that was largely to do with the fact that it carries rhythm really well, and it was just at the right sort of Goldilocks sort of sweet spot for giving enough bass and rhythm, but at the same time, kind of not overdoing it, if you like. And it sounded, really good with these speakers. And in fact, that as a pairing is superb if you want to rock out. So back to what we don't really like. We know they're relatively difficult to drive. We know it's got okay sort of, you know, bass down to 52 hertz, but actually all of the thunderous bit is above that. The treble, well, that's not that extended, but you know, it's detailed. An organisation is kind of average, it's okay. So if you put on something which is very complex, you're not going to get all the different sort of instruments laid out in front of you in a very organised way, but for the price point, it's about average for where you might expect it to be. Same for imaging, really. Imaging from left to right is decent, but it's not as good as, say, a KEF LS15 Meta, or as good as a Neat Iota or an Iota Alpha. Then we get to the soundstage. So these speakers do a nice wide soundstage, which is great, but the depth bit is a bit weird. So normally for depth, if you've got a really good speaker setup, you've kind of got like a curve. So it kind of sweeps around your head or in front of you, in fact, like this. So it kind of goes from the back wall all the way around to your ears, and you hear things kind of left and right in that kind of nice arch kind of way. With these speakers, they do create depth straight in front of you, so you kind of can hear the layering between the front and the back, but that kind of comes straight at you and then goes left and right. So it's almost kind of like a T shape in the way it creates its soundstage and its depth, which is unusual, and maybe that's something to do with the MTM design, I'm not sure, but I've not heard a soundstage sound like that before, and it does take a little while to kind of get used to that. It's not a bad feeling and certainly not unpleasant, but it isn't something that you normally get. You normally get that kind of curve, or you don't get any depth at all and it's left to right. This gives you a T-shaped depth image. So, you know, those things aside, I'd also say that it's not for whisper quiet listening. So although they sound okay for low level listening, that's not where they excel. Where they excel and where they're great is for really pumping the music out loud and proud. These speakers love a bit of volume, and when you get them going, it's insane. The bass scale is enormous. It's like having a concert, and I just loved it. It was so much fun. The neighbours probably loved it less so, but yeah, it was thumping. So let's go into these rock and rollers. What is it they give us which we really, really love? Well, as I said, they're very easy to move around at 4.4 kilograms, but they've also got this Aeroflex technology, and that's what's enabling those two 11 centimetre paper woofers to really pump out the bass in such a good way. It's not just thick bass or scale bass, it's really good quality, it's fast and it's detailed and textured, and oh man, it's just absolutely insane for a speaker of this size. It really is. And the Aeroflex piece basically allows you to put it relatively close to a wall without it kind of bloating as well, which I think is fantastic. It really is good for fitting into a living room if you haven't got dedicated space to listen to them. The sounds scale is very, very large, so certainly it sounds a lot bigger than the speaker cabinet size would suggest. And you know, when you've got this meaty, powerful presentation, you can't help really but get involved and engaged with the music you're playing, particularly if you're smashing it out very, very much at concert levels, which is kind of what I did, because, you know, why wouldn't you with something that loves power? Another element to this is that the upper mid-range is kind of slightly rolled off a little bit. Now, that's not a criticism, and actually it's pretty good. Again, coming back to why it's a good sort of indie and rock style speaker, because often things can become fatiguing if that upper mid-range area is left either flat or tipped up, and you want to listen to these loud. It's quite nice to just have it rolled off just slightly there in the upper mids, because it allows it to be not fatiguing at all. Then you can listen to lots of sort of not so hot recordings and really enjoy them still. So look, we've talked about rock and roll, we've talked about it being fantastic at loud volumes. We know that this speaker, particularly matched with the Exposure XM5, is a cracking pairing if you are into that sort of music. So I've got to now flip into music mode, because I want to talk about all the things I listen to. So one moment, let me just grab my CDs. And it was CDs that kind of inspired me to do this review, because I was thinking, oh, I've got a bunch of albums that I used to love as a teenager, which I don't listen to that often anymore, because from an audiophile perspective, they don't sound wonderful, because some of the recordings are quite compressed. Well, where do we start? First up, this Soul Wax. They were a band from America. This album's called Much Against Everyone's Advice. That was also their sort of single from this, which did very well in this country as well. A fantastic album. And the song I liked in particular here was the sort of opening track, Conversation Intercom, and you kind of get a build to it. You get that kind of sort of rhythm building throughout the track and going and building up into a sort of crescendo. And great album. Haven't listened to it for a long time. Fantastic with these speakers. Second one, Doves, Lost Souls. Now this might not be actually what you'd term kind of heavy indie. I mean, some of the tracks are quite heavy in there, but not really proper rock. But this album is actually recorded probably a bit better than some of the others I've got in my hand here. But I loved it. This was one of my key albums as a teenager that I really went back to time and time again. The song that I listened to over and over in my bedroom as a teenager was called Sea Song, which is an instrumental from Doves, and drove my mum nuts as I played it about 1,000 times. But again, the opening track on here is the one that you should definitely reference for the Ophidian 2. It's called Fire Suite, and again, the scale of the bass and the way that the song just lifts is superb through these speakers. Next up, a familiar sight for indie music, Kasabian. You can see here when CDs were only £3. Yeah, I wish they still were. Anyway, this one, well, it's all about processed beats here. Great track, processed beats. Also apologise, by the way, a lot of these CDs are beaten up, but that shows you they're well used and also belonged to a gnarly teenager. Yeah, processed beats. Obviously, if you know that song, you know that it's got a fantastic bass line to it and sounds great through the Ophidians as well. Moving on to one of my all-time favourites. This is Showbiz by Muse, their first album. I don't know if you can see this on the back. You've got Matt Bellamy and the gang looking about 12 years old. And actually the title track from this album, Showbiz itself, starts off with kind of like a deep drumming. It's like boom, 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 boom. And again, the Ophidian just monsters that track because it's got those mid-bass drivers really pumping out with such control and just effortless power. And yeah, I mean, it just made this album new again for me. It really was incredible. And, you know, not all the songs on that album are recorded that well. So again, the slight dip in the upper mids works really well. And then we're getting a bit harder now. We're going to Queens of the Stone Age, Rated R. Nicotine, Valium, nicotine, alcohol. Yeah, I can't remember all the lyrics. Anyway, that's Feel Good Hit of the Summer, but followed by The Lost Art of Keeping a Secret, an amazing track. Again, you know, I suppose, what do they do to that track? They give it a richness of sound and really does just deliver. I mean, you can feel every part of Josh Holmes' vocal in that, kind of meaning it and kind of, you know, I suppose when I heard that song for the first time, I might have been a slightly angry teenager, but now I listen to it and I kind of think, yeah, actually, it's not just anger in there, there's passion. And that's what really gets you when you're listening to the Mojos, because it can capture that kind of indie passion and the way that it kind of comes across in trying to motivate you to feel a certain way or emotion. And then finally, one of my sort of albums that I go to because it's quite difficult to listen to because it's not a fantastic recording, is Manson and Attack of the Grey Lantern. And this sounds pretty good through these speakers. That is the test. If this sounds good, if Oasis sounds good, a speaker is non-fatiguing and you can live with it. But often when a speaker is non-fatiguing and you listen to it like that, it can be too rolled off or it doesn't have something particularly interesting and therefore can be a bit boring. Whereas with this, the Ophidian Mojo 2, there is nothing boring about this at all. You know, it is very masculine, you know, Ophidian. It sounds very masculine, doesn't it? The make itself. But the sound is masculine, but at the same time, it's quirky and interesting as well. Maybe that's the Mojo bit. The Mojo, baby, that's a little bit Austin Powers. I feel like if Austin Powers and a WWE wrestler had a baby, this is what it would look like if it was a speaker. Yeah, okay, so that's my summary for this review. Austin Powers, WWE wrestler, baby speaker. Isn't it fantastic? Rock and roll. Okay, I think that's pretty much us done. So if you liked the video, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here very soon.